Fantastic. So we are on. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending where you are. Welcome to SIG API Machinery bi-weekly meeting for open source Kubernetes. Today is surprisingly already February 7th of 2024. I don't know what happened with January. I didn't see it in my rear mirror. Went by so fast. We have a couple of great topics today that could take longer to discuss. So thank you, David, for raising them and CC for being here to discuss them. So let's get started with this. I will give it to you guys.
Sure.
Go ahead, CP.
Should I? Anyway, I don't have access to share the screen. But I guess I give access to everyone to the a very short, brief slides I just put up this morning.
Is there?
Do you want to present?
Yeah. Can we let CC share?
Yes. Let me make you co-host.
Yeah. You can share as well. It's.
No, it's okay. You can do it better. Make co-host. Okay. You should be able to share now, and I will start sharing.
Let's see.
There you go.
Am I sharing?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So today I want to talk about this CAP. For someone who don't know what this is, this is similar as validated admission policy, which we just promoted to beta in the Kubernetes 1.28, which aims to address most of the use cases previously being handled by mutating webhooks. And where to start? I'll start from the very beginning. Since it aims to provide a in-progress kind of additional admission plugin which address the use cases previously covered by mutated webhook. So a natural thought could be directly do what mutating webhook did currently. So in the way they did is using JSON patch, and in current CAP, we are proposing to use structure merge, which is the underlying algorithm used by server-side apply, and that's a rationale behind it. I'm not gonna go through everything, but it's basically in consideration of consistency, maintenance effort, and all the other So here's the proposal. Okay, sorry. So we're gonna have the incoming admission request, and we will leverage the power of cell to do the structure construction, which generate very similar as the configuration patch in server-side apply scenario, and specify which field, you need to specify which field you want to modify, and then we do structure merge between those two and get the final state of the object. So that's a high level kind of idea. And if we go through the API ship, it will look very similar as the existing validated admission policy. So I'll skip most of the part, but basically sorry, I forgot to I directly copied. So we will have the mutating admission policy together with mutating admission policy binding, and we will also have parameterization supported. So user could use those new resources called mutating admission policy, which we have exactly the very similar field to do the match constraints and match conditions, which were used by the polity to specify which resources it's gonna work on, and param kind, which refers to which parameterization resources you're gonna be referred to, and then the mutations field, which is basically the only thing that will be different from the validated admission policy, which allow user to specify how you want to mutate the object. And it's basically same for the mutated admission policy binding and the params. Before we dive deep into how we want a user to specify the intent of the actual mutation, I want to mention some of the high level like design decisions we made earlier. So here is a very brief kind of API request cycle when it comes into automation controllers. I guess the order will be like the first to go through the existing of course, we do mutating always first before all the validating stuff. And we don't care about validation too much because it will run parallel, but for mutating, it will be run in sequence. So we will first run all the kind of in progress mutating animation controllers, including all the defaulting stuff like the always like limit ranger or always poll policy, some of the internal stuff first, and then the mutating animation policy, and we will run mutating webhook. So one of the question which gonna discussed earlier will be the ordering, like within the mutating animation policy, how we gonna order them, like how we decided like the order of the of all the policies got in. So I guess thanks David suggested to order it randomly. Previously we were thinking to keep the same mechanism as what we do for the mutating webhook. Mutating webhook do have a specific order which runs lexicographical ordering based on the resource names. So it of course has the benefit of having like the deterministic ordering, but also it allow user to kind of hack it or have like the some mutant webhook running with dependencies because they could enforce the order somehow by, I don't know, use either like a ZZZ as a name or AAA as a name. I saw some of the examples in real life. So and then ideally we want to encourage user to write the order independent mutations. That's the initial kind of motivation of order it randomly. And the other consideration is for the reinvocation mechanism. So currently, as people all know, we have like the reinvocation mechanism supported. So if say we have a mutating webhook mutated something which got mutated like later, then we will have those runs the second time. I think the second run is the most. We don't go further to do third time or fourth time rerun. So we only rerun second time. It sounds really problematic like in theory, but it turns out it works really well. We didn't get much complaint about that. So we will like following the existing path of that. And yeah, so before we dive into the detailed use cases, I want to like share some of the limitations we have with the current design. So I know we wanted to target like as many use cases as possible, but for certain like use cases which involves creation of other resources or something, like it might not be supported by the current design. And also for some use cases which involves additional resources will not supported. We do have a hacky way of like using parameter resources as a reference to additional resources. Like I know some people like do this, but like it only works when you have like a clear kind of picture of which like additional resources you're going to be using. If you want to like refer to some additional resources based on certain criteria under the incoming request, it might not be supported. So I write some like very basic use cases of how user like express their intent there. So this is an example of inject a init container. So as people know, as people who are familiar with server-side apply well, like they might find it very familiar. So the end goal of this is just generated the configuration patch. So you can just state, like what kind of fields you cared about, or like what kind of structure you wanted to be added or injected. So you don't need to touch any other fields. You want to keep the same. So when the structure merge gets into place, it will keep like all the untouched fields as the previous state. So yeah, some easy examples. I do want to spend more time on some like complex use cases, which thanks for David to raise those. So the the examples, I guess, involve like the schema like in deep nested struct, as well as like some conditional statement. Like in this case, like say we have a pod and we have like volume mounts specified under each containers, and we have volumes specified under the specification. So we wanted to be able to create the volumes when there is a volume specified in volume mounts, but not existing in the current volumes list. So this like before that, I want to specifically mention like the composition variables we used. I think for people who are familiar with validation admission policy, that should sound familiar. So it's basically we provide a list of variables which can be reused later in the cell expression among like the entire policy. So and in this list, then in this specific use case, we will have like the volume mounts list generated and the volumes list generated, and then we just try to inject the volumes which fills into those criterias. And because it's a nested struct, we might need some like additional libraries to be able to flatten the list. So that's something which could possibly added in the future cell library. But I do want to mention those kind of use case could be supported with the current design, and it's just maybe with some extra work. So, and another thing I want to mention is we want to do the feature incrementally. So we don't plan to have everything ready in the current 130 releases. So the current 130 releases, we plan to have a minimum like working version together with the API changes got in, and though we later we could kind of spend more time thought carefully on each of the aspect. Like I've listed a couple of things we might want to be handled in the future instead of the first alpha. So things like field removal, which we're going to talk about later, because this kind of use case cannot supported by structure merge very well, as like if people know server-side apply well, so that's an existing issue there. And some of the cell library updates, and we are open to suggestions. I think Joe also mentioned something with hashing like functions, which could possibly be used in other areas like controller sharding and stuff. So that's something we could potentially add. And also, if like as what we suggested, the best practice for mutating webhook, we also suggested the similar thing for mutating policy, which if you want to have a mutation action there, we highly suggest that you have a validation like in place just to verify the final state meet your expectations. And in this case, if we wanted to have like mutation together with validation and with all param resources involved, that will require like six new resources being created, like at the worst case. So that might not sound ideal. And later possible directions would be maybe letting mutate and validation sharing the binding or something like that, which could be discussed further. And of course, also the type checking stuff, we plan to handle the like maybe in the second alpha, like which works like could be work similar as the current implementation policy. We have status to report the type checking issues or others, but we do have existing type checking like it goes into first alpha. So some basic runtime one, and also the conversation variables. So and maybe many others. Yeah. So that's the plan. And here is the field removal handling we want to be supported. So as people who familiar with the structure merge algorithm or server-side apply. So because of the we didn't support the field removal well there, and we plan the plan is to leverage the power of cell optional field. I have listed the link there, so it's basically support the conditional field selections and stuff based on the presence of the optional value, and gives the set the null value to the field. So that's the future plan. I'm not sure if that's enough for the summary or not, or should we go to the
Jordan's got a hand.
I had a quick question.
Oh,
I know one of the motivations for using the structural merge was to piggyback on all the work that was already being done around it. So I can see how using like none support in cell would maybe let us express on the cell side that we wanted a field to be removed. But if we're taking what cell is expressing and then dropping it into structural merge to actually do the merging, wouldn't there also be work required on the structural side to remove a field that you're not currently the owner of? Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Oh yes. So I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly. Let me repeat it. So the server side apply currently, like the way the it work not server side but the server side apply, the way it works for like the field removal is not like if you want to remove a field by simply as I'm sorry, sorry. So by simply simplifying and set the value will not make the will not like achieve the goal.
So can server side apply already remove a field you're not currently the owner of by explicitly setting null or something?
I can add some details to this. So the answer is no. In server-side apply, if you don't currently own a field, you cannot express that I want to own the opinion that this field should be unset.
Yeah,
you can't do that directly. That's a gap. I think it probably should be addressed. I would love to have the way we address it be very congruent with what we do here. The way that we did this in the prototype was that we actually took advantage of some cell internals to track which fields that you had marked as optional none explicitly. And then we did a merge, and then we did a post-merge removal of those specific fields.
I see. Okay. I was just trying to understand if this was sort of limiting how much we could take advantage of structural merge, or if there was work to do there as well. Okay.
Yeah, I think there is work. I would be really sad if we ended up doing some stuff here and then there was no way to do it in server-side apply ever, or if we did it in server-side apply later and then it was incongruent with what we did here.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess the future plan would be like take what we achieved here and see if we could like make it also happen like improved in server-side apply side.
To propose doing a second alpha where we handle the removal stuff separately, because that would give us one release to build out a bunch of the stuff for a bunch of common use cases, but then also get more time to think about how to keep any removal features congruent with server-side apply.
Yeah, Steve, go ahead. Sorry, I lost track of the raising hands. Yeah, go ahead.
No worries. I just had a question. I saw that the proposal right now says not to use any field managers here, and I was wondering if we could expand on like how we got to that decision, and would it impact the removal stuff or the amount to which we're congruent with SSA?
Oh, that's a great question. We just talked about field manager, like with Jordan yesterday. So the plan, the baseline here would be like we will follow like whatever mutating like webhook did regarding with field manager, and we're trying to not introducing new issues. So thing here is like I guess the current agreement would be like do things like what mutating webhook did, just to force the field change and trying to act in it's not fully acting in behalf of the request order, but for like the existing for the fields already owned by the request order, we're gonna keep the ownership there. But for like the newly added fields, like it will be unowned, something like that. Yeah.
So I guess one thing I don't think I understand, how much of the deletion commentary is related to not having a field manager versus
Oh, you
being
mean
orthogonal to that?
you mean the field remover not supported by server-side apply?
Yes.
It accentuates the problem. So in server-side apply, with a single request, you cannot say, I want to own this field and own the opinion that it should be unset. But you can in two requests. You can first somehow take ownership of the field, but you have to set it to a value to do that. And then you can clear the value of the field. And once you've done that, you become the owner of that field. You know, you've taken ownership of that field and then you've unset it. So you can remove a field in that way. You don't really own the opinion that a field is unset after that, but it does allow you to actually do the field removal. So it's always, if you're willing to accept an intermediate value on a field, then yes, you're always able to remove fields. Sometimes that's not acceptable, so you couldn't. Here, the problem's accentuated because you can't even take ownership of the field in any way first. You just wouldn't be able to remove it at all.
I just want to add like one additional information there. So yes, in server-side apply, you might can like hack it by first claim the ownership and then specify you want to remove. But I think it's not working for like a normal list where you just cannot remove the items from the list, if I remember correctly. So there are still corner cases which cannot covered. Basically, that's my understanding.
I see. Yeah, I think we've all accidentally expressed our intent to remove things on accident with server-side apply.
Yeah, I think that's a real problem, and it's kind of tricky to formulate this KEP given those limitations. So we're trying to navigate that, and it's one of the reasons why we're like proposing a way that we could do it to show that we don't think we're going to paint ourselves into a corner by making progress, but I think we do need to admit that like we haven't fully figured that out yet, and we're going to have to before we reach a certain level of maturity on this feature.
So server-side apply removal depends a lot on what fields are currently owned by the field manager doing the apply.
Yep.
And so by not having that be part of the calculation for this mutating admission policy, like it's one less variable. Right now, the only inputs are like, here's the incoming object, and here's what the mutating admission policy returns. If we started to take field manager into account, then the variables would be the incoming object, the existing fields owned by the field manager we attributed to the mutating admission policy, and what the mutating admission policy returned.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's better or clearer or easier to understand, even if it would maybe enable field removal.
It would.
As long as you recall twice, right? I just want my biggest thing when I was reading it was trying to figure out if this was going to lead to more like functionality differences between sort of like client-side, server-side apply, and then server-side apply in this context that would be difficult for users to navigate, given that server-side is hard as itself. But it sounds like no.
Yeah, I don't think that's the problem, but I do agree with Jordan. Like the only time where a field manager would matter is once you've been able to claim the field. So like, yeah, if you did a create and then later did an update and both of them were mutated, then the mutator would potentially start owning fields, and then on the update it would have ownership of fields to be able to do things, but it gets really complicated.
I didn't mean to hang up the discussion. If you want to go to the next example, but I forget which slide we were on.
Oh, David, I saw a hand.
Oh,
Do you want?
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for putting this together. I know it was last minute, and I know that I specifically asked for it. And I wanted to go ahead and, like, I guess just try to detail my path to these questions, right? So I had previously read through mutating admission about, I want to say 4 or 5 months ago. And my reservations there at first were like, will anyone be able to use validate? Because of all the bindings and the parameters, and I have 4 different objects involved. And the answer to that, I think, has been largely yes. Like, there have been some hiccups of like, well, it's not working because you don't have a binding, or your binding overrode this and therefore it's doing something different. But for the most part, that has worked. I ran into trouble with the server-side apply merge when I tried maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, to use very similar logic to merge together multiple CRD manifests. And the result was not good, largely due to atomics, I believe. Do you have an example in the deck? And I don't know if you just haven't gotten there yet. Working through the atomics, because I think a lot of the questions, I think the key questions for the SIG are essentially, will platform extension authors be able to author and debug these policies? Because using cell to build up a partial resource manifest is different than using it to validate. And then whether we have enough coverage to support the use cases that we have, particularly, I think, around atomics and removals. I hear there's still questions around removal, but atomics are using the same server-side applied logic.
Yes, thank you for raising that. Yes, I guess there is a existing example in the meeting documentation as well. And we do aware that especially CRD tends to have a very large kind of atomic structure there. So yeah, and I guess like the CRD like version kind of example could serve as a use case here, where like yeah, and like the plan is we still support a user to describe their intent of how to kind of manipulate the fields under this struct. And I think like I wanted to differentiate of theme kind of thing. So I guess we try very carefully to use the word server-side apply in the cap, because it's not actually the server-side apply. We are just trying to use the structure merge algorithm, which happen to be used by server-side apply. But we are actually directly calling the underlying algorithm. So that's why like the field manager and other topic, I guess, got confused earlier as well. So is anyone trying to say anything? Yeah.
So maybe one of the examples I think I saw in your KEP update, pardon me, in your KEP update is this one. And it is default toleration seconds. I don't know if you're able to click that, Fede. As I recall, the attempt, what this admission plugin currently tries to do is to set a toleration for not readiness if it's not present already, or rather, it sets how long it's willing to wait. Are you able to show? Is it? I'm not the screen updated. Is that me, or is that?
Sorry, I can make. Sorry, I can make you the.
Yeah.
1 second. Oh, I don't have the permission to.
Let me do it. I can do it.
Sorry, I'm not the host, so I'm not able to.
It's two
But I can
text
stop
streams.
sharing.
Okay.
So.
Okay, now David should be able to present.
All right, let me see what I got here.
And there is a hand. Joe, you have a hand up?
Yeah, I'll let David finish his question, and then I was gonna. add some
Well,
thoughts.
I still don't
on a new
seem to.
direction.
Oh, there it is. Maybe I've got it. Screen, Windows, content. Huh. I can't seem to work this out. So I clicked a link. That right there shows the default toleration seconds, and I think you wrote it. And what I'm trying to understand is whether in the examples we accidentally broke ourselves in writing an example on a field that's atomic that will accidentally smash all the values, or whether that's what the plugin actually did. So I've linked both the API that I believe says tolerations are atomic, and
Sorry, hello? Am I the only one lost?
and the example.
We can see your screen if you're trying to share something there.
I tried to share the links in the meeting chat.
Do you want me to put them on the screen for you?
If you could just show those two links, that would be great.
Yeah, okay. Give me a second.
Sorry.
It's okay. Okay, 1 second. Share screen. I think it's Google Chrome. Okay. This one?
Yeah, down line 705.
You load the diff, it'll expand.
Load the diff.
Yep.
Yeah.
I click on the thing. Hold on.
Go upper,
Yeah.
the middle one.
See where it says load diff? It's green.
Load diff.
Blue.
Hold on, I'm trying to see my screen. And I have a lot of overlapping windows. Load it, okay. Set 705.
Yeah. And so will this accidentally smash all the tolerations?
I
will
think it will.
And so, and I'm not going to say like this, my concern here is that when I'm looking at it, like we're having trouble writing it ourselves because we didn't even think to look at the schema. And I'm somewhat concerned that other people will have the same issue. And I'm interested in like whether we have some method of mitigating this.
CC or Joe, do you agree that this is returning a single item for an atomic list, and if we applied this with the merge algorithm, it would stop?
Yes.
Exactly.
So the original plan was like if we plan to do like the structure merge underline anyway, we would like have to somehow reconstruct the atomic struct, and we want to basically let users simplify the writing their intent by only writing partially, and then underline we can do a copy, modify, and replace kind of process. That's the original thinking under the atomic, but there would be concerns on like say
Yeah, I mean, the way I would characterize this is there are some atomics where we don't think we have a problem, right? Like, so if you want to append something to a list, you have access to the old state of the list, and you could call append and set the new list, the list replacing that value. That's a pretty clean way to make an atomic change to some things. Unfortunately, I think what David has found, which I think I'm really glad he found it, is there are a non-negligible number of use cases where that doesn't work. I think CRDs are like a shining example. You have this recursively nested structure that is huge. It starts all the way up above the schemas. I think it is like all the versions of all the schemas are atomic. It's like one big atomic thing. And there is no way in Cell to make a modification to that and reconstruct the rest in a reasonable way. So we have a limitation there. I think it kind of stems from a slight difference between the way server-side apply works and what we're trying to do here. In server-side apply, you really shouldn't be partially owning something. You should either own it or not own it, because you can't really coordinate with the other changes to it, right? Like, so if you want to own the schemas for a CRD, you kind of have to own it all, and you have to know which one's going to be stored and which one's not going to be stored. You can't really share that with another applier. But in the case of mutation, it's arguably more reasonable to be able to like go into a schema and set something up in a CRD as a mutation. So that difference does exist, and we're going to have to find a way to deal with it.
I will note that like atomic versus, I guess, map lists or keyed lists or whatever the alternative is, like lists are atomic by default, so that if someone is making a custom resource schema and they aren't steeped in API machinery concepts, and they're just like, I've got a list of things and here's the schema for the items in the list, like if they don't really think about it, what they're going to end up with is an atomic list. So I would expect most naively defined schemas lists will be atomic. It's possible to change that after the fact and like make a list keyed, like evolve your schema. And I guess anyone who was previously applying things that worked atomically and specifying everything in the list, they would still work all right with apply semantics. They would just be like taking ownership of everything in the list. But I think atomic lists are not an edge case. I think that's probably the default.
Yeah, the good news for that one is the formula that we can show to use to sell to either remove or add something to that is quite clear and quite terse. It might not be super obvious, but we could document it, and I think it's cohesive. It makes sense, right? Like once you see it, you're like, oh, if I have a list and I want to add something to it, I just plus append to the end of it. Or if I want to remove something, I just filter it and then set it to the filtered value.
Yeah, so there are two points there. One, I think atomic lists will be a normal thing. The second is if things start naively as atomic and people write admission against it, they're like, oh, I did a filter and it removed the thing. Great, ship my admission. And then the person who made the schema is like, oh, actually, I didn't even know about this atomic differentiation. What I actually want is a keyed list. I'm going to make my schema keyed. Now, the admission that was doing filter is not actually dropping the thing anymore. Your admission basically has to be married to the exact semantics of the schema.
Yeah.
Which
is that worse than server-side applies today?
Is it worse than server-side apply?
I'm not trying to bucket. I'm just thinking it through.
I think it's differently bad. So like what I've seen many people, even though server-side apply is still there, they'll use updates to express things they have difficulty with. Where like they tried it with server-side apply, didn't do what they wanted, they just switched to an update. And with admission, they wouldn't have a choice.
Yeah, like I know the JSON patch stuff is super ugly to express, but I can reason about it in isolation. Like I can look at a JSON patch and say, this will remove this key at this location, or it will, I guess, fail to apply the patch. Here, like I don't actually know what this is going to do unless I go check the schema. And for schemas which can change over time, like custom resource defined schemas, that's scary to me, I guess. For like in-tree ones, I have more confidence that we won't do things, but like we've forgotten to make things merge lists in the past and then fix them up normally in like alpha stage. But like not being able to understand what a thing will do unless you also know change in the future is I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah, I think that's good feedback. I think we should track this one really carefully, see what to do.
I'm wondering if this would be helped with constructs that express intent, that encode intent, like helpers that encode intent in the cell expression. So like if your intent is to remove an item or to add an item or to change an item, then when we are applying the mutation, at that point we know, like the thing applying it knows if this is an atomic list or a keyed list. So it can accomplish the intent the right way, but that does imply like a layer of wrappers or helpers or something.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is the way that we were trying to supplement removal was taking advantage of the fact that we can do a lot of introspection in cell, and some of it's at the compiler or macro level. So you could introduce helpers that we could inspect very early on and help us understand, right? Like if you needed to have like something very clear, like this is just a single field set, even if it's in an atomic, and we're able to formulate the function that would state that. We could process it. I'm pretty confident we could figure out how to process it. I'm not so confident how to formulate it, but if we did, I think we could process it.
Would it help, like if we separated by adding a new field, like specify the operation kind or something, like it's a specific, it's a deletion operation or it's a I don't know, merging or applying, or so we could handle it differently, and will it like make it more clear?
I think many would end up being, I want to add or replace, or add or do nothing. I think where there would be one where you would want to update or remove or add something that would be ambiguous when the result was looked at.
So would it help to properly separate like the say update or injection kind of operation from like the removal or delete or whatsoever? So user just have to write multiple mutations if they want to do both, and say delete and modify a field.
Some of the comments in the chat run to similar lines of thought. Or, well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. When I read them, I thought in a similar line of thought to that, right? Where what if all the selections and the bindings and the parameters, what if all of those were shared, but the thing that describes how you mutate was a pick one of these, where it was you could write a JSON patch, or you could write a cell expression like this, or we found an option, or I want to do a delete, maybe. I guess would people look at that and say, oh, no, I only want to have one way to rule them all? Or would we say we could leave space for that in case we find a better way to express these changes, but we still like the notion of this is how you select the resources that we're going to apply to, this is how you exclude ones that you don't want to touch, and this is how you bind parameters.
I had considered earlier the idea of just having like a patch type field, and right now it's like we would just have it be apply, but you could have it be JSON patch, and then somebody's like, I just can't figure out how to do apply here, and they just fall back to JSON patch. We do have to support two things forever, so I'm not super excited about that part, but
one thing I've been thinking about, like if this is what we want people who are currently using simple mutating admission webhooks to use, it would be nice if they could translate their existing mutating admission webhook almost verbatim to this. And that is a point in favor of having JSON patch semantics be an option, even if we think we can do better in terms of like making it type aware and like if there are benefits to this approach, it's also harder to translate an existing admission webhook to this approach.
Yeah, there seems to be a couple pros there. One is that it's a catch-all for anything that we can't do with apply. It would support migration from webhooks, and I mean, I still feel like the apply approach for many simple cases is very simple and clear. Like, I want this field to be here, and so I just show what that looks like. But then, I don't know. JSON patch is pretty well defined, so I don't see it as causing us a lot of long-term.
I think in some ways that would give me more confidence in trying to move forward with something like this proposal, because there's a lot of it that I think we now have a proof point that says it works.
Is there a way we can let this merge patch be used in the unambiguous cases where we don't think people are going to be bitten and surprised? Like if you're not going through like lists or atomic objects, then I think the merge stuff does exactly what you would expect it to do when you look at the patch. When you go through lists, levels that are lists or atomic objects, it's like, I don't know if that's what you're expecting.
So because you can bind to multiple kinds of resources that have very similar but not identical schemas, you, I believe, could actually bind to one that is atomic and one that is list. And I mean, you guys are all sort of laughing.
No,
but I had
of
an
course we
incident.
can. Of course we can.
Okay. I had an incident that was very similar to that. And so I don't think that's possible, Jordan.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think like to start this, to get experience with this, if we think we will need a fallback to JSON patch for cases this can't express, and to ease transition from mutating webhooks, can we constrain the merge patch to cases that are unambiguous? So like if you want to work with things down under lists, use JSON patch. If you have a simple object and you want to set a top level field or a label or something like that where you're not traversing through lists, like sure, go ahead. At least to start. Like as soon as, I mean, this is all alpha, so we can drop it and do an alpha 2 if we need to. So I'm not super concerned about that. But if we say, if you have simple top level things that aren't within lists, aren't, you're having to deal with map list atomic semantics, merge is nice. It has these benefits. If you want to do things inside lists, use JSON patch the way you've been doing it with mutating webhooks, at least to start. Does that work, or does that cut off a lot of things that we really wanted to use merge patch for?
I think
it's worth exploring. I think mechanically it's not too far out of what we know how to do to process the cell expression and compare it with the schema to determine. I think you could do this statically, determine if you're going to be running into something that we would want to ban. Still trying to think through what that means for users. There's quite a bit of stuff where people want to go into containers and pods. That's a really common use case.
Yeah. It's probably like labels and annotations and containers and pods are probably the most common things.
Yeah, that's like 80% right there. So labels we definitely get. Containers and pods, if we could define it and still get into those and have something reasonable, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if those get to stay though.
Containers aren't atomic. Containers are mergeable.
Yeah.
Containers are mergeable.
That might be reasonable then. I think the actual code to do the check is well within range of things we understand how to do. We already did a lot of static analysis of cell against schemas when we did cost analysis.
the containers list is not atomic, but are individual containers atomic? Can you server-side apply a single field within a container without including the whole container? I think you can.
You would have to use, I'm almost certain, because it's very uncommon for people to mark a struct or an object type as atomic.
Yeah. I mean, this is probably Joe and David's call as API machinery leads, but just from an API perspective, I'm way happier if we have a way to express things unambiguously that has parity with mutating emission webhooks, and we try at first to start by keeping people from shooting themselves in the foot by doing stuff with atomic lists that we don't have a great story around yet.
I think I agree. What do you think, CC? What do you think of the guardrail idea?
Oh, sure. I totally agree that like the current support could like support maybe at least more than half of the use cases, especially consider containers is not atomic, and we definitely could do the things to block user from manipulate atomic list, so to avoid unclear ambiguous behavior. So yeah, and I also think like even if, like it didn't stop us from like further possibilities. Like if we go with this direction, like if filters, if we want to support it on JSON patch in some way, it's easy to add the support.
So
Andrew Sykem had written a previous iteration on this mutating idea that actually did use JSON patch. So there was an example of implementing that we could potentially leverage. It was really terse. It was really easy to write.
David, would you put guardrails in place on the alpha, or would you let it be unrestricted and see what people did with atomic or merged lists?
I would like to structure the API in a way that would allow us to have pick one of this or pick one of that. Trying to structure the API in that way will tell us a lot about what choices in that API are specific to Cell and which ones are not. And if we're able to isolate it, what would I do for an alpha? On the one hand, I sort of want people to get burned as quickly as possible so we know. I know, yeah, I know you're small on my screen, but I know the look on your face right now. But
I mean, like construction of JSON patches, I think would still need to be dynamic. So I still think there would be Cell involved.
Quite probably, but I don't know right now what that would look like. I'd like to see what that would look like. Like, are parameters bound exactly the same way? Where would we drop this in? Would I start with protection? I guess may as well try to start with the easier pieces. Atomics are just so unexpected. Like you hit it with owner references. The owner ref struct is one of the few atomics that we have, and it's correct. Like it should definitely be atomic. It still surprised me when I was fiddling with stuff.
Yeah, so it sounds like one thing I think everybody's agreeing on is that if we have JSON patch and alpha, we're going to get to see people trying both. We're going to see what they prefer. And then there's some question over whether or not we should put the guardrails in place. It sounds like one advantage is that we can get some experience with that and see what it's going to look like and see if people get frustrated with guardrails. But if we don't do the guardrails, then we get experience seeing if people shoot themselves in the foot.
I guess if we already have the JSON patch, putting the guardrails up will guide them in the right direction to get where they want, or guide them in a direction more likely to give them what they want, which I can see being better.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my view of how we would want people to deal with atomic lists is either explicitly with a JSON patch, where they say like add this item, remove this item, change this index, that kind of thing, or with a intent-based helper, where instead of saying here's the list, do it, they say I want to add an item, I want to remove an item, I want to update an item. That maybe produces a merged list. I think either of those would be fine. Maybe the helper one would be nicer if we get to that point. JSON patches are a pain to write. But
Oh, one cool thing is if you have the guardrails, then we could make you use the helper. You have to
Right.
pick. You can't just write
Exactly.
something.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
I'll still be interested in how we reconcile different schemas for a single policy.
If you go with the intent-based one can do the right thing for both an atomic and a merge list.
Okay, that's fair.
And the other one, we might have the guardrails just lock you out of things where we see differences in the schemas.
Well, but there's bad things that happen in both directions, right? So if you started out fine and someone changed their CRD schema and now your policy no longer applies, you're not going to be happy.
Yeah, the changing of schemas is really bad.
Well, it's not bad, it's necessary, but it is complicated. If the world never changed, our life would be easier.
Necessary things can be bad too, David. We are about out of time.
Yeah.
Yes, and I suspect I'm going to get kicked out of this room in like 1 week.
Okay.
Anything else we wanted to capture today? It's all recorded. Super good discussion.
I just want to confirm, like my understanding is right. We want to keep the door open for JSON patch, and we want to set the guard for like to prevent user basically writing their intent for at least atomic list, and yeah, and we want user to be able to like at least try the alpha and see.
For the first alpha, that is
Sure.
my understanding, and I would not be surprised if we have a second alpha to
Sure, that's totally expected.
pick the approach we think works better or expand the approach.
Yeah. Thank you. Sounds great.
All right. Let's wrap it up then. Thank you for coming and participating today. I will upload the recording later today, and I hope everybody has a good rest of the Wednesday and rest of the week. Thank you, Cici, Jordan, David, everybody.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.